want fucking justice!
Around 2:15, the doors to the Senate chamber are locked.
A bunch of senators just ran out of the session. Yep. A bunch of senators just ran out of their session.
Oh, did they?
That's what they said. Whoa. Yes. Senators ran out of their session.
Senators ran out of the session.
Yes.
We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
305 to 50 be advised, Capitol Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol!
Good morning and welcome to Let It Be Known News. As you see there, wow, 4 years ago, that was the scene at the U.S. Capitol 4 years ago. Brazen assault on democracy. At the time, President Trump had incited, I should say, a violent mob to attack the U.S. Capitol in a desperate bid to overturn the results of a legitimate United States of America election. The egregious act not only threatened the foundational principles of the republic, but also showcased an absolutely scary display of double standards in law enforcement's response to civil unrest. Imagine, as we've said many times before, imagine if the rioters had been Black Lives Matter protesters instead of predominantly white Trump supporters. In fact, I think there was like one Black person in the crowd there who was actually filming the what was unfolding. We know the response would have been vastly different. Historically, Black demonstrators have been met with excessive police force and labeled as thugs or terrorists. And those are words that Donald Trump has used, thugs, for much less than storming the U.S. Capitol. The military type response to Black Lives Matter protests across the nation totally is different. With the under preparation and hesitancy to use force against the Capitol rioters. Of course, deep-seated racial bias in law enforcement continued. Even on a day like that when officers, eventually law enforcement officers, what was it, 5 of them eventually lost their lives? And just imagine had they been immigrants. You see this wild assault on immigrants. The narrative spun by those in power and segments of the media would have been xenophobic, however you say that word, among other things. They would have, of course, called for stricter immigration laws and further vilified immigrant communities. But imagine, they call for stricter immigration laws for far less, but nobody's calling for stricter punishment for something that even those old schoolers was clutching their pearls about. Oh, the U.S. Capitol is so sacred. They flew a Confederate flag in the Capitol for the first time in its history on January 6th. And then adding to that, the involvement of numerous law enforcement and military or ex-military personnel in that mob makes it even more disturbing, because it not only highlights the extent of radicalization within the ranks, but also raises questions about the integrity and impartiality of those entrusted to protect and serve. Their participation in the riot represented a betrayal of the oath that they took to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. But yet here we are. Not only has that behavior been excused, it's been celebrated to the extent that you now have decided to allow the person who incited that to run the country. And not only that, not only run the country, but as we are seeing on the new reports this morning, Trudeau is on the brink of resigning as leader of Canada's Liberal Party. And it comes at a time, of course, when conservative forces are gaining momentum everywhere around the world. And of course, it was just a couple of weeks ago that Donald Trump made some comments about making Canada the 51st U.S. state. And that ramped up tensions in Canada, a long, long time ally to the north, perhaps the most loyal U.S. ally. And it just totally showed you Trump's bigger agenda and its challenging international sovereignties. His push to incorporate Canada, Trump, that is, um, as part of the United States isn't merely rhetoric. It's an aggressive stand that really has ignited diplomatic and domestic unease and certainly is influencing what's going on in Canada. And again, bring it back to Black Americans and other minorities. The rise of such conservative nationalism is nothing short of alarm. It's a terror act in itself. We know we talked ad nauseum about how this is affecting civil rights and destroying civil rights, the gains made with civil rights, and continually placing, we talked about immigrants and immigration. Um, mm, this is going to be hard, even and certainly for any minorities that are living in Canada. And conservatism is just getting stronger around the world, and the implications are really include the racial equality or inequality, social justice. That's some of the implications. It's amazing that Trumpism is taking over everywhere now. Canada is it's really something to see this unfold. That's where we are. That's where we are, and folks are saying, "Oh, you gotta this type of behavior, this type of swing. It demands such a vigilant response uh, from folks like the NAACP, et cetera, those who say they are committed to defending diversity and human rights." This is a problem. And what's going on there with Justin Trudeau um, is just a symptom of the problem. And RNG says that Honduras is threatening to kick out U.S. troops, and China is moving into that country. So this is something to watch, folks. Justin Trudeau, um, many believe today, but certainly no later than Wednesday when Parliament meets, that he is going to um, resign. And part of that resignation, according to many in Canada, many of those in the libertarian groups are saying that it's because they have no plan to go against Donald Trump. They have no plan to with these tariffs and other things that Trump has threatened to do, and and Justin Trudeau's lack of response to Trump's continued rhetoric about making um, Canada the 51st state. Um, Several of the lawmakers there in Canada are upset with Trudeau because he has had no response to that. And more importantly, they say he has no response to all of the drastic changes that Trump is bringing. Mike B says Justin's downfall, and this is, yeah, it's true. He says Justin's downfall was when he flew down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. And this is what it's true in the sense that this is what um, several folks there in Canada have cited. So Mike B is spot on. He is definitely spot on. And speaking of January 6th and Trump, um, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights has had this lawsuit that has been going on, and most recently, a federal judge ruled that it can continue. And the case is called Smith versus Trump. And we're going to be talking later this morning. Later today, I think 11 o'clock, but we'll get back to you guys with the time. But with the Lawyers Committee, representatives from the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, and we want you guys, because this is really interesting. And if you could just put some questions in the chat that you'd like us to ask folks from the Lawyers Committee about this particular case. Uh, we were hoping to have Damon Hewitt, who is the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and we know that they will be represented in this discussion later this morning on Let It Be Known. So you got to check it out. Again, we plan to air at 11. That time could change, but we will keep you posted. But the lawsuit filed by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights was on behalf of 8 U.S. Capitol police officers who defended the U.S. Capitol on that fateful day on January 6th, naming Donald Trump, among others, as the defendants. And they are saying that these officers put their lives on the line to protect the votes and voices of everyone in the country. And we are going to be talking with them um, about this lawsuit, and certainly, again, we invite your questions. Okay, so we're not going to be live with that. We're going to actually record that. So we really definitely want to hear from you. If you could send in some questions or some thoughts about that. This lawsuit is called Smith versus Trump is the official title of the lawsuit. So if you're not familiar with it, you might want to look it up. But it argues that the attack on the Capitol violated the Ku Klux Klan Act, and that Trump and others deliberately spread election fraud claims and incited violence against members of Congress and the law enforcement officers whose job was to protect them. And so this long-standing KKK act that has been on the books since, of course, the civil rights era. And so the lawsuit argues that Trump violated the Ku Klux Klan Act. Can you imagine? Now, he is going into office as a convicted felon and someone who has also um, been charged with, civilly anyway, violating the Ku Klux Klan Act. Think about that, folks. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Um, And Austin makes a point. He says Canada wants to toss Justin Trudeau for not defending Canada's democracy. Meanwhile, America defended her democracy by re-electing Trump. Mike V says, I'd like to know what happens when Trump pardons the insurrectionists. Will they still be brought up on state charges? 14th Amendment, Section 3. That is interesting too, because that would fall in the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C., which is also pretty much under federal jurisdiction. Remember, D.C. is just not, it's not a state. It is beholden to the federal government. But it's still a great question. And maybe if Denise is watching this morning, maybe she can weigh in on that, because that's interesting. That's a very good question, Mike V. Yeah, Mayor Bowser just Matt wrote about that too. You can read about that in the Washington Informer. Mayor Bowser met last week with Trump, and she called it a great meeting. She said it was a great meeting, which is interesting. But that is a great question, Mike V. Because there should be some, they should be eligible for some state or local charges, or however you want to phrase it. So we will see. That's a really good 14th Amendment, Section 3 is correct. So we got to check that out. Is Mayor Bowser kissing the ring, you guys? It was a great meeting. How do you have a great meeting with Donald Trump? How do you characterize a meeting with Donald Trump as a great meeting? Because he goes in with his set of his agenda, right? And it's generally his way or the highway. Austin says everyone says great meeting and cries on the plane home. Explain that to me. Whether you are an ally or an opponent of his, you can never say great meeting. Could never say great meeting. Hillary Clinton dismantled the man in a debate, and she couldn't walk away and say that was a great meeting, that was a great debate, that was great. It can't be. Power 90.
Seagrave spoke with the mayor today about what she described as the synergy she has with the incoming Trump administration.
In 2016, after his first election, Mayor Muriel Bowser traveled to New York to Trump Tower to meet with the president-elect. And then in early 2017, she met with President Trump in the Oval Office. So it's not unusual that, like so many others since his election victory, Bowser traveled to Florida to meet face-to-face with President-elect Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate.
I know my job is to speak up for the residents of the District of Columbia. I left that meeting with the president's commitment to work with us, to stay in line and communication with us. And that's what we're going to do. We know there's some big issues.
The meeting on Monday lasted about an hour. Today, Bowser was reluctant to talk about specifics of their conversation.
I would characterize it as a good meeting, and a meeting that was forward looking.
On the campaign trail.
Here's the thing. Why are you flying down there? Why go there for a 1 hour meeting? I'm getting on the plane to go to Florida for a 1 hour meeting. The only way I'm getting on the plane to go to Florida for a 1 hour meeting is if I'm coming away with a stack of cash.
The government away from the mayor.
We will.
Bottom line.
DC government away about his
Forward looking.
On the campaign trail, Trump was blunt about his plans to take
Mike
control
says,
of the DC government away from the
A
mayor.
great meeting with insurrectionists in chief. Why even have a democracy then? And he says, has Mayor Bowser forgotten that the MAGA caucus banned her from entering the House floor? It's like, I'm not getting on a plane from DC to Florida. It's not, I know it's not a long trip. It's probably a couple of hours. But I'm just not doing it for a 1 hour meeting. And under those circumstances, he wants to meet. I understand this idea of wanting to have some measure of peace or whatever, but you're just not going to get it. You got to be resigned to, you know what? That's the last place I'm going. When he comes into office, just go down to the White House at best. Heck, have him meet you at City Hall. It just doesn't. And I get it. He's going to be the president, but I'm not going to Florida. And then she comes out of there with the same political rhetoric you hear from everybody else who kissed the ring. The residents deserve this and this. Of course they do, but you guys failed them. You failed. You 100% failed them. And now you're doing the whole political speak. The politicians are just, as a group, as a whole, it's just no good. They're just useless people. Useless. There's only a few. Good night. Just be honest. What it is the hardest thing. The most difficult thing for a politician is to just come out and be honest. Don't you get tired of folks just lying to your face, as they say, playing in your face? And Muriel Bowser knows better. Come on. Or maybe she don't. Maybe she don't. DC is a great, potentially great autonomous city or state or whatever. But they lost. DC has lost. Eleanor Holmes Norton has done yeoman's job trying to um, get statehood, and she's been failed time and again by not just the opponents, the Republicans. She's been failed by Democrats, president after president. It's never a top agenda for them. And it's surprisingly, when in Eleanor Holmes Norton's tenure, she's been there a long time, the Democratic presidents have been Clinton twice, Obama twice, and Biden. And yet it has never been a prime topic or priority for them to get statehood, which would mean, folks, among so many other things, and I single out the Democratic presidents. Obviously, Eleanor Holmes Norton is a Democrat, but more importantly, what that would mean in elections for Democrats. So it's stunning that there's been no, outside of Eleanor Holmes Norton and her colleagues in Congress, many of her colleagues in Congress, there's been no real push from presidents, Democratic presidents, to make DC a state. And that's really, that shows you, like I said, most of these politicians are trash. Lauren G says he is a president, not a king. She is scared and she needs to be called out. I bet Jasmine Crockett would not. And this is what I'm saying. There you go. 1,000%. I bet AOC would never go down there either. I bet Benny Thompson would not go down there. Yeah, Tricky. They are full of it.
It's Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. Congresswoman, good to see you. Let's just start with your reaction to the fact that there seems to be trouble in paradise between this bromance with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and how you think that may play out.
Yeah, hopefully it's cutting season instead of cuffing season for these two. Listen, I think that Donald absolutely wants to cut the strings, but he really doesn't know how. I mean, this is a guy who has always decided that he wanted to surround himself with people that had money and or power. And right now, all he cares about is money. Listen, for those that felt like he was going to be their savior and be the guy that was looking out for the middle class, he has never been middle class. And so he's not looking looking out for them. We know that he is filling his cabinet, or at least attempting to fill his cabinet, with other people that are very wealthy. He is looking out for his future and what that will look like. And so that's why it is difficult for him to cut the strings, because he needs Elon.
Cutting.
Yeah, exactly. It's pathetic. Mike V says, if Trump entering did nothing else, it exposed who our allies were and who our adversaries are now. Here's something else too, the stomach, if you will. In Ohio, Governor Mike DeWine, or whatever, however you say his last name, he signed a new measure into law that permits police departments to charge as much as $750, charge the public to release body cam footage from its officers, including dash cam surveillance. Um, the governor says no law enforcement agency should ever have to choose between diverting resources for officers on the street to move them to administrative tasks like lengthy video redaction reviews, for which agencies receive no compensation. And this is especially so for when the requester of the video is a private company seeking to make money off of these videos. This is absolutely awful. The law, as we said, they could charge $750. You want body cam footage? You're gonna have to pay $750. Your kid, your loved one, had an interaction with police in which they assaulted him or her, shot and killed them when they were unarmed. You're gonna have to pay for the footage. And obviously, this law totally undermines any transparency. And of course, who does it disproportionately harm? Black Americans and other marginalized communities. Body cameras are intended to promote accountability and justice, particularly for communities that face systemic over-policing and racial profiling. So they want to place this steep financial barrier on access now. So what they want is to silence those who are most in need of transparency. And it goes along with what President-elect Trump said in his campaign, that he wants the complete immunity for officers. They should have every right to shoot and kill, to do whatever, regardless. I mean, body cam is a critical tool for ensuring justice, especially for families who seek answers and accountability after these police encounters. The fees just denies many people, their right to public records, especially those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Taxpayers fund body cameras. So you're asking taxpayers to pay again. Yeah. And tell us what you think exactly. And put it on, put your comments in YouTube if you can, because of course, you got Elon doing his thing with the algorithm. So tell us what you think on your comments, and specifically on YouTube is what I'm trying to say here. Because he has no reach yet into YouTube. So let us know what you're thinking on this topic and on other topics. This is, again, you are taxpayers. You're already paying for the body cam. And Mike V is asking, isn't it contradictory to the Freedom of Information Act? And so this law says it's not. And even with the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, even with that, Mike, they do a lot of times require some fees. Certainly not $750, but they have required fees when you file a Freedom of Information Act. I think after, if you have to file it a second or third time, every time after that, you have to pay for it. But this shielding, again, shielding law enforcement from accountability is what this is all about. Once again, even constitutional law professor Jonathan Enton said that it makes it more expensive. Making it more expensive, he says, strikes me as a step in the wrong direction. So again, tell us what you think. Put your comments in our Let It Be Known YouTube page. Love to see them. This has happened to you, right? You got your phone nearby and you say something. You say McDonald's. The next thing you know, on your phone is McDonald's. Something about McDonald's. Your phone spying on you. Your vehicles now are spying on you. The fast and detailed data that Tesla collected on the driver of one of its Cybertrucks that exploded in Las Vegas last week received some praise from law enforcement and criticism from privacy data experts. Within hours of the New Year's Day explosion that burned the driver beyond recognition and injured 7 others, Tesla was able to track the suspect's movements in detail from Denver all the way to Vegas. And also, it was able to confirm that the problem was explosives in the truck, not the truck itself. And so that information, while it's helping authorities with their investigation, it also has shined a spotlight on the issue of privacy as vehicles become less like cars and more like computers on wheels. Many of the latest cars not only know where you've been and where you are going, but also often have access to your contacts, your call logs, your texts, and other sensitive information thanks to cell phone syncing. I know that my car seems to know my schedule. When I get in it, the map comes up like, okay, that's where I'm going. How is that possible? But Tesla's ability to collect and relay detailed data, it raises some privacy concerns. And let's face it, folks. Again, if you black, uh, that's another problem. So, it's just think about that. They track within hours. They track that driver's movement from Colorado to Nevada. So modern cars like Tesla, they are increasingly integrated with technology that takes in your location and everything else. And we know cell phones are already a hub of personal data, information being harvested and used for advertising or worse. People frequently, as I noted, they frequently notice ads or spam related to topics they've discussed or searched. And I say Black Americans again, Black folks again, minority folks again, because think about the surveillance and policing and profiling that already goes on. Now you can't even get in your vehicle. You know, the mob used to say, use the payphone. It was no more payphones. And then sometimes you say, I'm gonna sit in my car and close the door and roll the windows up and have this private conversation. It's not private. It's not private. So, so if you in your car plotting something, they gonna find out. And of course, Orange G has the Obama phone, and he drives a truck like Sanford and Son, so he's good. Yeah, and not to mention, as Greer points out, the Apple just recently was sued for $95 million. We'll see how that goes. Mike V says that they have been tracking cars since LoJack and OnStar were were first introduced in the 90s. Folks just didn't know. Yeah, and they've been able to pretty much perfect it now. Um, so you just know that there's no privacy. And think about it too, Mike. Mike V. Uh, Privacy is done. You walk out your door, and most likely you're on somebody's camera, whether it's from your neighbor next door or the street light pole or someone's, because police is not the only ones with dash cam. And we see that with that what do you call that thing where they go around YouTube, not YouTube, Google goes around with their cars. I've seen those cars a few times too. So the Apple did settle, Dr. Nicole says, a $95 million suit for that very reason, breach of privacy by Siri. Yeah, they did. And that's the other thing, right? You go to somebody's house, Siri, do this, Siri, do that. And looks, my phone is nearby, so Siri is trying to do something here. But that stuff always made me curious because somebody's listening. And then you think about it, like Young Thug went to trial based on the lyrics of his songs. And we got this all types of we're being surveilled everywhere, folks. And the whole world is falling apart anyway. And Mike V points out, which is what you're not going to have, but he says this is why you need a strong office of civil rights within the DOJ like Christian Clark, but that won't be happening in the next administration. Right. I mean, there's programs like facial recognition, and you know what that does. Again, just bringing it back home, disproportionately misidentifies Black people. So it shows you how biased technologies can lead to wrongful accusations or arrests. So if vehicle and phone data are combined, the potential for misuse magnifies. And think about this: insurers, employers, or other entities, they could exploit this data to reinforce discriminatory practices such as denying jobs or coverage based on driving patterns or perceived risks tied to location. It's woo. Folks, pay attention. Things are really, really happening here. Joni King says, as Dick Gregory used to say, talk to your cable boxes because they are listening. And Trixie says, me and my daughter was sitting on my grandma's stoop and the Google camera caught us sitting there. I haven't heard, so you know she's a New Yorker. You know Trixie's a New Yorker. When's the last time you heard the word stoop? Sitting on the stoop. I love it. I absolutely love it. Sitting on the stoop. Wow. That took me back a long way. Took me back to when I was bald head and if anything grew out, it was black. In Louisiana, the state is being sued for facial recognition. RNG says, of course, a black man was falsely arrested in Baton Rouge. The man was in Atlanta when the crime occurred. Somebody was using his car or something, and the car said, no, he was here. Is that what happened? It's terrible. Terrible. Well, folks, if you're in the Northeast like I am, and you're looking out your window, you see some white stuff on the ground and coming down in the wake of the system forecast. Cold Canadian air is pushing deep into the U.S., driving temperatures 10 to 30 degrees below average. The forecast of snow, ice, and a powerful blast of cold Canadian air driving these temperatures is now upon us. There's heightened risk with this. So be careful out there is what we're going to say this morning. It's essential to take proactive steps to ensure safety and well-being. Extreme cold and icy conditions can make even routine activities quite hazardous. Beware of black ice on roads and sidewalks, which pose that little quiet, silent threat, and increases the likelihood of car accidents and slips that can lead to serious injury. So, um, folks, just really be careful out there with that weather. For those without adequate shelter or heating, the plunging temperatures also can quickly become life-threatening with frostbite and hypothermia, setting in faster than many realize. So just remember, this isn't just about convenience; it's about survival. And preparations, you begin at home. Really, just make sure that you're protecting your extremities, and pipes. That's the other thing too. If you have a leaky pipe, the faucet is dripping, I should say, something like that. Your pipes can freeze and burst. So take care of that. Take care of that. Make sure you have like supplies. The supermarket was jam packed over the weekend. People preparing, but make sure you got flashlights and batteries and extra blankets. Um, Charge your phone. And if you got a backup power source, secure that. Make sure that's all good. Let's just be ready for this. It's well, I tell you, it's it's some frightening times. Even talking about the weather. Lots of car crashes. Lots and lots. Look at that. You gotta be, and so that's the thing too, right? You not only have to be mindful of how you're driving, but you got to be very alert because folks don't know how to drive no more. They just don't know how to drive. And stay away from these trucks. Folks be challenging these big rigs. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's like white lines. Don't do it. Remember that song? I mean, come on. Don't do it. We've been talking recently, right, about how awful the mainstream media is and how where journalism has fallen off big time. It's not nothing. Most things aren't like they used to be, but journalism has really, really taken a nosedive. We see outlets um, carrying the water of certain politicians, giving so much misinformation and untruths. Used to be that you worried about a outlet racing to be first and they get something wrong or whatever. Now it's just intentional. Like you don't have to be right. Mainstream. And the latest thing, this Washington Post cartoonist quit her job at the paper, saying that her bosses blocked publication of a cartoon that depicted billionaires, including one resembling the Washington Post and Amazon owner Jeff Bezos, kneeling before Donald Trump. And so they told her, no, we can't publish that. We can't do that. Now, this is a Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist. But it's a reminder of just how far mainstream journalism has strayed from its roots. Journalism today is barely recognizable compared to the eras. Growing up in New York, especially for me, I mean, you have people watching on CBS, Channel 2, Ed Bradley. I mean Randall Pinkston, but then later you had on 60 Minutes Ed Bradley, John Johnson. Remember John Johnson? Some might, especially if you're in New York, you might remember John Johnson, the black man. He had the afro. Um, folks like that. And of course, Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite. Those journalists believed in speaking truth to power, like the black press. One of its mottos have been, and they did it regardless of who sat in the seat of authority. So this cartoonist um, had to resign or decided to resign after being rejected without explanation or suggestions for changes. Um, it wasn't about an editorial decision, apparently. It was a blatant act of censorship. And that's part of the troubling reality of today's mainstream media, which is dominated by corporate interests and now billionaire influence. Even the cartoonist herself noted that this was the first time her work had been killed because of its target. Of course, this target was her employer, Jeff Bezos. But the incident isn't isolated, though, because you remember the whole thing with Bezos spiking a planned endorsement of Vice President Harris ahead of the presidential election, or even Mark how you say his name, Zuckerberg, donated to Trump's inaugural fund. This is not isolated acts, but they are part of a pattern where the lines between journalistic integrity and corporate interests are blurred, and it leaves the public with a media that prioritizes profit over principle. There's no principle anymore. There's just no principle. I remember years ago I worked at the LA Times in their community news division, and this is may have told just I'm sure I told the story before, but the Staples Center was being plans to build the Staples Center was announced, and um, they had decided to become a partner with the LA Times to do some ads and stuff like that, and it was a big deal, big money deal. And some of the reporters got word on from the higher ups at the LA Times on how they were to report on any issues with the Staples Center and those involved in it. And it was a mandate, and it almost caused the union to go on strike. The reporters were in an uproar. No, you continue. You keep editorial separate from advertising. And there was a big fight about it. But at the end of the day, the journalists stood up and said, "No, we are going to uh, write and publish real news, not fake news." But not today. Not today. Um, that's it was how things were supposed to be, how folks were going to be able to trust their local news or their national news station or newspaper or news outlet. Mainstream media has given folks absolutely no reason to trust it. No matter what you read, no matter what you see on CNN or NBC or ABC or Fox for sure, it would behoove you to like a doctor's visit to get a second opinion, to get a second source, and particularly if they're talking about anything political. If you really want to be informed with the truth, you got to go get a second. You got to take a second opinion, second thought. 'Cause this is not. You can't trust mainstream media, whether it's a mainstream newspaper like the Washington Post or a mainstream cable network like Fox, like CNN. You just can't. And if you are, and many are trusting Fox News. Many are trusting, I guess, not many are trusting MSNBC anymore, but some are. Um, that's why you have so much disinformation and misinformation. because then you hear something, you go to the doctor's office or your clinic, and you see Fox News on, and somebody says something, you run off, and then you start putting it on social media, and somebody else puts it on social media, and then they share it, and now it's fact. Now it's fact, and everybody is less educated because of it. And that's just the way it goes. So tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about that.
Race was an important fact of life for Ed Bradley. In Tulia, Texas, Ed met the undercover narcotics agent who was accused of framing poor blacks, a man who used that word.
The word. Yes, sir, I've used that word. I've used it a lot. Yeah, what's up?
Is that a greeting you'd use with me?
Oh, no, sir, not you.
It was
many.
Why not? Why not? Ed Bradley truly was, as RNG says, the GOAT. And there's no two ways about it. Yeah, wow. Yeah, yes. But please give us your thoughts on this, on your thoughts on mainstream media and what you think of media in general. Because we're in serious times. And folks, media has always played a big role. It's always played a huge role. So let's get your thoughts um, as we close up this morning on this snowy Monday in the Northeast. I don't know what is it like out west. I saw some places it's balmy and some places it's not. This actually this storm that's coming through the Northeast supposedly um is going to hit like 48 states. So you can't really find um places where the weather is really good right now. Orange says his biggest problem with mainstream media is they went from reporting to aha gotcha moments to asking some so-called expert to tell them their feelings about a subject. That's a real good one. That's a real good one. And that began, it really began, Orangey, from my recollection, in the early 2000s. It slowly began, but really picked up steam around the time, not to tie everything to this, but around the time that Trump first ran for president in 2015, 2016. And now, of course, it's become over the top. And it's just no holds barred now. You don't you don't have to get it right. You don't have to really educate. I mean, the media was the proud fourth estate. And now we look like, as a whole, used car salesmen at best, analysts chasing lawyers at worst. So it's just the way it is. It is too cold for crawfish in New Orleans, he says. That means staying inside and waiting until it warms up. You can go light the grill, strike up the grill, carve you out a little, shovel the snow around the grill, open it up, throw something on the grill. Trixie says the media to me is very biased. If they are for the person, then nothing but positive stories. And if they are against the situation, they will find anything and everything negative to say about it. And we've seen that a lot. Now, she's in New York, and we've seen that a lot, especially in the Big Apple, right? And we've seen it with the Daniel Penny situation. We've seen it in so many other situations. The bias reporting, the lack of true information. It's absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. Again, we try. We make sure that we're not writing. And when you read, stories on the Washington Informer, or Black Press USA, or Ford Times, Houston Ford Times, or West Side Gazette. You're reading facts. You're not reading, conjured up stuff. The Bronx is freezing. There's she says, no, there's no snow yet. The Bronx is burnt. That reminds me of The Bronx is Burned. Anybody ever see that documentary on the 1977 New York Yankees? It's a great documentary. We talked about Luther last week, and that documentary is still resonating. It's still resonating. Check it out if you haven't seen Never Too Much. Luther Vandross. Greer got me all hooked on it. I watched it and it was absolutely sensational. And it makes you like really, if you already missed really good music and really good singing, boy oh boy, it's gonna make you really long for it if you watch that. David Youngblood says, "Don't interpret for me. Just give me the transparent facts." And that's the problem. Again, you just gonna have to live with, I guess, today, because they're just not willing to do it. And that is out the window. Even like advertisers and sponsors, they're not really caring about that stuff because they continue to put their money behind these big media machines. He says, every time I hear the word Bronx, I think about The Bridge Is Over. Stop it. KRS-One. I got news for you, Orangey. KRS-One was from Queens. Maybe his nose was from the Bronx. I don't know. But his body was from Queens. Nonetheless, folks, we appreciate you joining us each and every weekday morning, 7:30 a.m. You get up, you have your coffee, your tea, your orange juice, your eggs. I don't know, your mushroom sandwich, or if you into that stuff, you have something with us. But thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow.
The bridge is over. The bridge is over. Bye-bye. The bridge is over. The bridge is over. You see me coming in the dance with the flipper sensei. Down with the sound called BDP. If you want to join the crew, well, you must see me. You can't sound like Shan or the one Marley. Because Shan and Marley Marlin, my rhyming like the gay. Picking up the mic, man, them don't know what to say. Saying hip-hop started out in Queensbridge. Saying lines like that, man, you know them can't live. So tell them again, me come to tell them again. Wah! Tell them again, me come to tell them again. Tell them again, me come to tell them again. Wah! Tell them again, me come to tell them. Manhattan keeps on making it, Brooklyn keeps on taking it, Bronx keeps creating it, and Queens keeps on making it.